from Game Boys to virtual reality to artificial intelligence. And where Game Boys comes in is the very beginning of my start before I even knew what virtual reality was. I was working in brain injury rehab, and at that time we didn't have any technology. It was all paper and pencil workbook exercises and some kind of, once in a while, hands-on functional skill training and everything, but very boring and non-engaging for people, who have suffered a traumatic brain injury or have to do rehab, but they're very frustrated about their loss. And so one day, one of my clients came in, a 22-year-old frontal lobe injured individual, car accident, and comes bursting into my office, and he goes, "Skip, you got to see this." And I go, "What is it?" And he goes, "It's a Game Boy, watch." And so he sat down in my office, and for 20 minutes, I watched him glued to Tetris. And this was like the first light bulb moment of, could we bottle that? Could we somehow make rehab activities that engaging that our clients would want to engage in it? And, with games, it was like, we could manipulate the stimulus presentation. We could make it easy. I knew a little bit about gaming, the flow channel, don't make it too hard so people get frustrated. Don't make it too easy so they get bored. Anyway, so I thought about this for a bit, and then I realized my mom had given me a Nintendo NES system for Christmas. I don't know why, but and it had this game, Sim City, in it. And that, I don't know if anybody who's ever played it, but that's the ultimate executive function activity in a game. And this is the version this was now 1990, 91, something like that. And I brought it in, and my clients loved it, but it was only useful for the ones that had the functionality to be able to learn how to use a Game Boy or a Nintendo gamepad. And for SimCity, there was a combination of movements and activities on the interface that it kind of made it limited only to people that were pretty much higher functioning. It was still good. Anyway. So then I listened to an NPR report, I think Jaron Lanier, 1992, talking about building virtual kitchens in a department store where you could design your own kitchen with a headset and cyber gloves or whatever. And that's when the real light bulb went off. And it was like, wow, we can build everyday functional environments in which, we can gamify them to a degree, but we can test and train cognitive ability within the context of a functional environment, but do the drill and practice restorative stuff as well. So that was where the virtual reality thing came in. I told my boss about it and about this virtual reality idea, and she goes, I just got this flyer in the mail. It's a conference called Virtual Reality and Persons with Disabilities. And then she goes, if you want to go, I think we have money. I was like, I'm there. And first person I meet is Walter, and he was doing a talk, and then we became fast friends since that time, 92, 93, something like that. And I struggled with what am I going to do with my life, and I decided I was going to leave the clinical work in brain injury rehab and take a postdoc at USC with the purpose, because I actually believed that we could do it then with the purpose of doing VR. I had seen Lawnmower Man, and it was like, oh man, we can do all this stuff. Well, it was a rude awakening in 1995 because this technology was really primitive, but it was still possible. So I ended up working with people in computer science, eventually building out a lab. And the main premise of the whole thing is why virtual reality? And, it was very simple, even from the onset. Think of the best metaphor for all this is aviation simulation. So just as an aircraft simulator could test and train piloting ability under a range of controllable conditions, we could test, train, teach, and treat a wide range of human functioning within immersive or highly interactive VR simulations, and in some sense, it's the ultimate Skinner box. And you have to, if you're not a psychologist, maybe you don't know what that means. I can explain it later, but controlled stimulus environment. So in '94, people started doing some of this work. Particularly, there was some cognitive work, but mainly it was in phobias and exposure therapy. And since that time, of course, here's the short list of areas where VR has been shown over the years to add value. But when you look at that image of Barbara Rothbaum's fear of heights scenario, you know, people back then would look at that and go, who the hell is going to take that seriously? That's like a cartoon. How do you expect people to activate their emotion and confront their fears in something like that? Well, that was the first thing that we learned in VR, in the clinical realm, was that we could fool the brain. That even though it was cartoonish, when you put on that headset and you had the depth cues and you had to walk across that bridge, people's emotions became activated. We had an emotionally evocative technology. Good news is, and this hopefully will filter through the whole talk, is that the technology has caught up with the vision. So this is, I think, Ritchie's plank or something from 2017, and it's, you know, light years ahead in terms of the graphics and the interaction. I love showing this because I've got a couple of kitty cats, and you have to rescue the cat off the plank and all that. So there's a little motivator in there. But anyway, so that was the motivation, and those are my two kitties. I don't have children, so I have to show my pets. So anyway, so eventually the work started to grow, the technology got better. We went from having to use an SGI system that Linda Jacobson here, if she's here, will know quite a bit about, $200,000 computer. We could translate that around 1999, 2000 onto a PC and start doing VR. Anyway, over the years, the lab grew, evolved, interdisciplinary group. We can't underscore how important it is to have people across all professions unified to build this stuff. And the work gradually evolved into the four major areas of effort: psych, cognitive, motor, and virtual humans. So in the psych area, you know, this is what a simulation of Iraq or Afghanistan looks like for exposure therapy for PTSD. You know, in folks that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is what it kind of looks like now. That's what it looked like in 2007. So again, you can see the counterpoint of the advancement in the technology. And in this case, you know, we didn't have a lot of money at the time, so we started thinking of other ideas. So we turned our content for PTSD exposure into a set of simulations for cognitive assessment for military return to duty after a blast injury or so on. So you could test people's attention, memory, and executive function in a military relevant environment that had the emotional cues that might impact someone's cognitive performance. We didn't just do military stuff. This was the first application, a 3D projection system for visual spatial abilities, where we documented really cool assessment of visual spatial abilities with different populations, but also training impact, very short periods of training with hands-on interaction with this stuff led to performance improvements on traditional mental rotation measures. And then the first headset version, this was a later version of it, this is 2003, virtual classroom for assessing attention processes in children. Particularly we're aiming for ADHD. And, you know, basically, child has to attend to the board up front, hit on when they see a stimulus sequence, an A followed by an X. Meanwhile, distractions going on around the room. Not only could we measure the cognitive stuff, but we could measure where were they looking and how much activity. You know, so a way to pick apart with ADHD, the hyperactivity or the inattentive component. Then we got involved around 2001 in building out physical therapy type applications. This was later. This was right before the Kinect came out. It was a system called the PrimeSense out of Israel. You know, range of motion. But, you know, the whole point being here, and this is what inspired the original work, was make the very boring, repetitive, and frustrating activities of rehabilitation fun and engaging and measurable. everything going on here is measurable. So you can see change over time. Well, that work grew over the years. And now this was like really cool back in, I think, 2018, 19, something like that, maybe even a little earlier, where you put the the Leap Motion sensor on the front of headset, you could track hands. Now you don't need that sensor. It's built into headsets where you have hand movement. And so for upper extremity game-based rehab, finger level, really cool stuff. Then after 2006, we started looking at virtual humans. Our center had been doing work with the Army for negotiation, training, role-playing, and so on for the military. Well, when I saw that, I said, well, geez, therapy's a negotiation. Why not build virtual patients? So this one is from 2013, School of Social Work.
Good afternoon, Sergeant Castilla. What brings you in today?
Well, my wife told me she thought I should talk to someone. She's been pretty concerned about me since they soldier suicide on base last week.
Anyway, that goes on. I'm not going to let it play because I know I'm going to run short on time. But the point being, you take novice clinicians and give them a chance to screw up a bunch with a virtual patient before they get their hands on a live one. And I think we're seeing this more and more in some of our later research as well. Things really have been documented that experiential learning does add value. So if you look at all of these areas, some of the recent efforts that have evolved, randomized controlled trial on the PTSD front, where the big punchlines on that study was that, number one, that when you asked people which they would prefer, they knew they were going to be randomized. We asked them which they would prefer in the beginning. 76.7% would have chosen VR, and these are veterans and active duty personnel at 3 different sites. As well, in our pre-planned predictions, we predicted folks with comorbid depression would be more likely to get a benefit from VR because it activates emotions. Again, it's emotionally evocative technology. And that, in fact, based on pre-planned predictions before we ran the study, was found. So, it's kind of like what Sue was talking about with the precision medicine idea. Is like, not just going by diagnosis, but maybe you do have to have some rudder like that. But to try to specify where VR makes a difference. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. It's going to make a difference for everybody. Anyway, that work has evolved, and independent trials. I always say this, that this transcranial direct current stimulation, I kind of always thought was voodoo, but they ran a study, an independent group at I think Providence VA ran this study showing added value by doing this with the VR exposure approach.
100% better? No, I wouldn't say I was 100%.
Can I get a little? Well, I'm going to back that up. Just to add a little personal color.
I mean, am I 100% better? No, I wouldn't say I was 100% better. But I do have my life back. I'm able to do a lot of the things that I did before. I don't have so many issues. I'm not running around angry all the time. And this treatment was, it saved my life probably. It saved my marriage for sure. So I would say if you ask me if it works, yeah, it works.
So that work has evolved as well with sexual trauma. We've built out a whole variety of applications around that, doing exposure therapy, have done safety and feasibility trials to show that we can safely administer that with a well-trained clinician. And this is a scene from one of the prototypes in Ukraine being developed by Ukrainian developers on our software. I got USC to donate the software to that group, and they're going to town building this stuff out. And I'm hoping sometime this fall we can start actually, implementing. We'll have 4 worlds built that have a lot of coverage of the different types of contexts that people have gone through. Also with Ukraine, as part of this project, we're trying to build a place for refugees that have scattered across Europe or in other parts of Ukraine away from their home, a way for them to gather in the metaverse. And we took a spherical image of a popular square in Kyiv, and in that, people can join from different locations with a clinician like this, and interact, and they talk about mundane things in the beginning, where they got their kid in the school in Budapest, but then over time, they start feeling more comfortable and start sharing some of the issues that they've gone through, grief, loss, and in a lot of cases, hope. So there's currently a trial going on in Budapest, a randomized controlled trial looking at this compared to in-person, which is a little bit more challenging to do. Virtual classroom, that now has escaped the lab and now become a product. This is what that looks like now. Published data with a large sample of neurotypical kids to build a normative database to compare with kids across other areas of clinical need. And as you can see, the yellow is ADHD, red is neurotypical across the age span. One thing you see is that kids do get better at some of these performances, omission errors, less head movement over time as they age, as you would expect. But the differences between the ADHD group, where on missed targets, you're seeing 12, 13-year-olds operating at a level of the 8, 9-year-olds and so on. So now you've got an objective measure of these things, both, there's many variables we capture, but the cognitive, attentive stuff and the hyperactivity and where a kid's looking. Is a kid looking out the window and missing a target, or are they looking straight on at the board? Two different types of attention errors. Okay, the virtual human stuff, I think that, yeah. So this is more recent. I think I need volume on this one.
No offense to you, but heck no, I wouldn't be here.
So it's a classical
I'm just doing this for her.
His wife's making him go to therapy kind of thing. And so motivational interviewing is a big element of this. So we did this at the Puget Sound VA with Greg Rieger and Aaron Knorr.
Relationships are about give and take, right? She wanted me to come and talk to someone else.
Anyway, training motivational interviewing from an experiential practice. And the data from that study published in 2020 showed, from this randomized controlled trial, showed actual differences. 10 minutes? Okay, good. And now we have a study under review now in training VA clinicians in doing a safety plan for veterans. So that's like a really important thing. And it's not like just check the boxes. It's about creating an empathetic and open space for folks to be able to talk about their stuff. So I hope that work has shown that the technology has caught up with the vision, that we are capable of doing, it's obvious, I don't have to sell that point, even though this is no longer in existence. I thought it was a great product, having sensors built into the headset to pick up, heart rate and, of course, eye tracking, pupillary dilation and all that. But there'll be more of this. And, of course, you got the Apple Vision Pro and all this, this stuff is just growing overall, cloud-based stuff. And at the same time, the research has grown. Now, research, science never sleeps, so we're going to have to keep going. And as the technology gets better and different, we got to start testing on that stuff, not rely on the findings from 2003 or 4 or whatever. So this brings in the next step, the work in AI. And I know there's a lot of questions about where that's going to go, but I think the case you have to make for this, the integration of AI and XR, is that we want to break down barriers to care. World Health Organization now estimates about 1 billion people on the planet with a mental health condition, of which 2/3 will not seek treatment. Can we do things to make treatment more desirable by having things that people do before they ever go to treatment, by interacting with a virtual agent that can be kind, supportive, empathetic, informative, help them come to the decision? Or can we deliver therapy or some level of care for those people that will never go inside that office? So some of our work began in 2010. This is 2011, this video, but this is one we did for veterans called SimCoach, and it was an online agent you could talk to. You could ask questions about PTSD, substance use. 5 minutes, okay. And anyway,
I'm not a real person. but I'm based on the personality and experiences of real soldiers and Marines. I'm still just a piece of software, but I'm getting better all the time, so hopefully I can be a helpful piece of software.
Transparent about its value. It could ask you questions. It could ask you to put your zip code in and pop up a list of providers in your area. In 2014, this is another one that needs a little volume. But anyway, we had cameras and microphones tracking users interacting with this character on the STARPA project, working with Russ Schilling, by the way, to develop ways of maybe assessment. This is one that's straight AI from a company called Conversation that I worked with for a little bit for helping docs and nurses, healthcare professionals interact, just like SimCoach, but questioning whether they're burnt out.
Let's start by talking about your work life. On average, how many hours per week do you work?
About 60.
Interacting with the user. Anyway, this goes on. I'm going to jump ahead because I want to show the punchline in a minute. The sub-punchline is Battle Buddy, which grew out of all this thinking about interaction with virtual humans for specific purposes.
Hello there, and welcome to Battle.
I need volume on this.
Hello there, and welcome to Battle Buddy, where we combine conversational AI, sensing, wearables, and mobile technology to provide evidence-based wellness content, create and walk veterans in crisis through their personal suicide safety plan, and connect them to appropriate care when needed. My name is Kevin, and I'll be guiding you through our vision for suicide prevention and wellness.
So this was funded by the VA, the Mission Daybreak program. A lot of people in this room helped support this, and I'm very grateful. But that led to a partnership with both Soldier Strong, which is a foundation for helping, supporting veteran needs in mental health, and Sidekick, which I think some of you are familiar with Walter, Amir, Brendan, whole cast of great people. And the idea was we were able to build out a lot of the modules that could operate on a mobile device.
Now, can we take a look at my mental health benefits?
But the AI component of it was something that was going to be more significant. So this is about a year ago where it stood. There's a user, a sidekick, a support agent. The user's going to talk now.
Now, can we take a look at my mental health benefits?
Definitely. You are eligible for mental health benefits through the VA Care Network. If you're in crisis, you can call the crisis line anytime. Otherwise, you can schedule an in-person meeting.
Safe, private place for a veteran to get information about a lot of things. Like, say the veteran wanted to know about...
I've heard the VA is using virtual reality to help with mental health. Any chance you can find some information about it?
Of course. Give me one moment to see what I can find.
No rush, thanks.
Here's a video about what the VA is doing with virtual reality.
VA wants to transform the way that we deliver care and the way that veterans experience care. One of the ways that we do that is through immersive technology like virtual reality and augmented reality. We know with these technologies, we're able to engage the whole patient, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional.
The beauty of this is that we can use information that is constrained to well-vetted information. It's not going off on Reddit and grabbing stuff. It's using stuff that we input, and we've already worked with the VA in growing this to build out the content that is already known to be of value and put it in this form where maybe somebody privately, anonymously, and wants to talk to a person. I think that the challenge with mobile apps and mental health to begin with, why there's so little stickiness, is that you don't have that engagement. So this is being built, but the cool thing is the model here is built so that you can go beyond combat veterans to parents with children on the autism spectrum. This was filmed in action about 3 weeks ago with Russ Schilling, and here's the character introducing herself.
Hi, I am Emma. I am a demonstration of an AI-powered personal sidekick for autism resources. I am not an officially endorsed product by Autism Speaks or the World Health Organization. I am here to show you the possibilities of this exciting technology.
So here's the question.
Yes, I have a daughter. Her name is Lisa. I'm her dad, and she's 6 years old. And we're very confused about her recent diagnosis and trying to get her ready for school. And she's not showing the symptoms we'd expect from autism. The boys we know in the
Kind of a
neighborhood
rambling
who've had autism
thing.
don't really act like she does. So we're confused.
It sounds like you're navigating some challenging times with Lisa's recent autism diagnosis, especially with the differences you're observing compared to boys. Autism often presents differently in females than in males, which might explain some of the variations you're noticing. There's a path to well-being item called Guide for Families
We've
of
got
School-Aged
the Autism
Children
Speaks
from age
content
6
loaded into this now, and are constantly going through and parsing it and getting it to be available on a wider scale for this purpose. Anyway, I'm going to jump to the end since I'm over time here. I just have one last slide here. Oh, yeah, let me jump ahead. I'm skipping all the good stuff at the end, but anyway, this is the cool slide coming up, talking about AI and about how it has a lot of value, although all the ethics are there, but here's the most contentious thing in psych, and here comes the slide. Okay.